Hey up, how do, and welcome to the second episode of today's set of features here on Loose Lips. This is feature 6, series 2. If you're new to this, I'm Ben Random. Hello everybody, welcome. Reason Loose Lips started was because of the lockdown. I wanted to speak with people from different walks of life and look to connect their optimism and share their story and connect, and raise the spirits of the people that watch. So that's how it started. Lo and behold, 6 weeks in now, series 1, 47 episodes. You can catch all them on YouTube. Go to Pop Cult Chic, or likewise you can go to Instagram and find them on pop.cult.chic. But right now I'm going to invite Mr Scruff to the chat, and that's how we'll be spending the next few moments. Hey, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. How are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm just going to pin this to let everybody know who I am speaking to.
No worries.
How are you getting on?
Yeah, not bad. I'm on my next door neighbour's Wi-Fi, so if it goes a bit dodgy, then yeah, I might give you a tour of my house.
Well, you've just had a tour of my cleaning there.
Oh,
My pots and pans.
I'm glad you tidied up for me anyway. Thank you.
Yeah. That's what you got to do. I thought I want the feng shui to be right, and I needed to clear it out. So yeah, there we go.
Nice one.
So how
How's it been?
you?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
busy,
go on.
How's it been with all the chats? You've been very busy.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting. It's like I was just saying before, like the lady that inspired it is a lady called Claire Scott, and she's a cancer survivor. And when we were at a wedding like a couple of years ago, I got speaking to her, and she dropped me off from York to Leeds, and that chat was just incredible. And then we sort of lost touch, and I was like, you know what? She's the sort of person that I want to speak with because she's inspiring, and I think people should hear her story as well. And then I was like, I wonder who else would be up for chatting, and here we are.
Yeah, nice one.
So it's proper mad. It's proper mad how it's going. But yeah, it's cool, man. I'm just really grateful. Spoke to people in Bali, in America, Australia, Qatar. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
No, wicked. And also, I think for guests like myself and everyone else you've had on, it's just nice to kind of chew the fat as well. You know what I mean? And it's sort of it kind of fulfills two different functions. One, obviously, the thing that you're doing and the questions that you're asking and the thing that you're trying to build. And for me, it's just nice to have a natter. So it's yeah, thank you.
Nice, all good. And shout out to Andrea. She said hello, Daddy. Nice. She's the glue that made this happen. Bless her.
Indeed.
A lot of love.
It's been badgering me. Yeah, I've not been really online for the last couple of months with the weather being like it is. You know what I mean? It's just been like, yeah, chat to people face to face, get out in the sun, homeschooling, all that business. So it's yeah, it's been nice. I've enjoyed the big pause, as someone quite eloquently put it. You know what I mean?
The big pause. Well, this is it. I ask everybody this, and you brought it up. Do you find this pause or reset?
Both. I think, like a lot of people. The thing is, I think, people fall into two camps. One is like they're working on the front line and, it's just completely swallowed them up and they're struggling to stay healthy, physically and mentally and all that kind of thing. People are in shops or whatever. So it's kind of, if you're working double hard and there's a lot of stress and it's a new thing and, obviously there's all that. And the other half of the population are a bit like, all right, everything stopped. And a lot of the everyday nonsense stopped as well. So luckily I'm in the kind of the fortunate half, you know what I mean? I've got my, I live with my family. I've got a 9-year-old to keep me busy. I've got a ton of records to tidy, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like just being job. Obviously no gigs probably for the rest of the year. So it's, I would have never taken this time off, like a lot of self-employed creative people. I'm quite a workaholic. So it's been quite nice to have an enforced break, bed the same time every night. I've had 8 Saturdays off in a row. First time since I was 16, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, yeah, I think it's positive. And I've spent the time kind of sorting out, I don't know, like checking who I give my money to in terms of making sure that the things that I fund in terms of who I'm paying my bills to and where I shop is going to positive stuff. Because I think when you cut place, you end up like, buying stuff on Amazon and, using a dodgy bank who invests in fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff. So I've been sorting out my kind of just keeping an eye on like what my money does and who it goes to and who it supports. You know what I mean? So that's been it's been nice to have the time to do that. You know what I mean? Sort out insurance and who does your electricity and gas and all that kind of stuff as well. So a little bit, yeah, just kind of nice homey stuff. You know what I mean?
I respect that, because it is a lot of the behind the scenes that if we can self-empower ourselves by taking back that control out of that, then it goes to the right places.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, once you've done it, that's it. You know what I mean? So it's like, because banks are some of the worst people for kind of funding stuff that they're going to keep quiet about. They'll be spending millions on adverts about any kind of charity connections, but obviously, there's a lot of dark stuff that goes on, whether it's funding investments in fossil fuels or kind of war or whatever, you know what I mean? Weapons, munitions, you name it. There's loads of bad stuff going on all over the world. So for me, it was just like, look, I've got the time. And I think if you're not kind of skint and struggling at the moment and you've got a bit of time, then it's like, right, go and change your bank, change your electricity supplier, change your gas supplier, check who you're insuring, if you've got your contents insured, who they're insured with, broadband, all that stuff. Because it'll probably take a day, and actually you'll find that over a course of a month, there's a lot more people benefiting from from the money that you're giving away, rather than it just disappearing and you're not knowing what's happened to it. And I think in this time, a lot of people are feeling kind of a little bit out of control in terms of bad stuff that's happening. And I think increasing neighbourliness and concern for who's around you at the moment, and people having the time to stop and chat and think about all that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's nice to be able to do that. And I've been talking to a lot of my neighbours about it and a few other people, and they're like, yeah, right on, because I've done a load of research, so I'm just passing that on to other people. It's literally like a couple of clicks on a website and they take care of it all for you. You know what I mean? But it's yeah, I think kind of ethically and morally, it's a good consideration, I think, because and your vote's not going to have a massive impact, once every 4 years. But I think what you do with your money, month in, month out, all this money you spend your life earning, I think it's good for it to go to something positive. At the very least, not go to, kind of hurting and causing pain and discomfort for other people, or for the environment, especially considering why we're in this mess at the moment. It's generally factory farming and big agribusiness and all that kind of thing. So, and no one seems to be really discussing that in the mainstream media. So it's like, yeah, don't, if you're going to eat chicken, make sure it's from a nice place, you know what I mean? And because if you're giving money to all these big companies who are, selling stuff dirt cheap, that's going to be, kind of made in similar circumstances to the ones that actually gave rise or have given rise in the past to all these various viruses, which are now, kind of knocking us down like flies. So it's kind of, yeah, connecting the dots, having a bit of a think, and just kind of let your money do good, you know what I mean? Because it'll all kind of help level things out a little bit, I think. And it's, it's a tiny thing, but you think how much money you spend in a lifetime, and it actually, can make a lot of difference to a lot of people.
Is there any you recommend, not endorse, but any that you recommend? That was a question by Rev Austin, who is also an incredible DJ who plays around the Manchester circuit. Shout out to Rev.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I've been, probably for the last 20 years, I've been reading this magazine, which is from Manchester, Ethical Consumer, which is, I get all my information from there. So my bank is Triodos, which is a Netherlands bank who've got a UK office now. They're based in Bristol. The electricity and gas is Good Energy. I think they're down south as well. Insurance is Nature Save. They're sort of southwest. Who else? Banking, business banking, Co-op. Been with them for about 30 years now. Trying to think who else. I mean, that's it off the top of my head. But the good thing with all these as well is, like, you ring them up and you normally get to speak to the same people, or places will email you and you've got a little email trail, and it's like, oh, hi, how are you? You know what I mean? And kind of, how's your family doing? And blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like, it's more like having almost like colleagues rather than, someone in a call center who's, giving you a fake name or whatever, and kind of being pleasant. But it's like, you can tell they don't want to be on the phone and you don't want to be on the phone either. So it's same again. You can tell, you're giving this, a lot of these ethical banks and ethical energy companies are reinvesting in renewable energy. They're actually doing some of the research and funding some of that research. But also, some of the banks are investing in companies who can basically prove that they're going to do some good for their community. And it's about using these tools that we have, like money, and all these organizations like banks and energy companies, to kind of start making a better world, rather than just kind of moaning about people who are making a mess of it. You know what I mean? Because moaning, it obviously can make some collective action and making your voice heard. But I think also, as well as dissent, I think you can use at least half your energy for doing positive things, and it doesn't take a lot of time.
We've been speaking for about 11 minutes, and already the way that you've come at this is just, it's unbelievable. Like, honestly, it's like the way that your outlook is, I think, really, as you were speaking, what clicked is shows just what goes into your sets, just the eclectic, the way that you approach, the way that you've just approached that really shows how you approach, like, the level of detail, but for its substance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, with music, same again, isn't it? It's for me, it's like I buzz off music. I buzz off other people's music, and for me, like, sometimes for me, the first time you hear something new, and it's like your ears are up like that. You know what I mean? What is that? And whether you're in a club or it's radio, if the radio's on, suddenly you're like, shh.
Yeah.
You stood by the radio with a notepad. Obviously you got Shazam and stuff like that, but it's like it's taken a feeling, because all this ethical stuff I've got from other people. Other people do it for a living, and obviously that's for them, that's grown out of a belief and into something that they do regularly. And for me, the music thing, it's like I still buzz off it as a kind of a listener and a music buyer and a supporter. And it's kind of, I don't know, you get a buzz and you want to pass it around. You know what I mean? And
yeah, you want to share it.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I buzz. I mean, I've not DJ for 2 months, but I've really enjoyed listening to other DJs. More radio rather than kind of. I find the whole kind of, I don't know, sort of being a club DJ from your bedroom. It's all a bit weird, you know what I mean? But especially like worldwide and some local radio stations, it's kind of like, wow, there's about 80,000 more DJs all streaming, but like, what about the people who've been doing it from day dot for nothing, sometimes for 10, 15, 20 years. So listen to Giles' show every day, Louis Vega playing it for every day for 2 hours, you know what I mean? That's madness. So it's kind of like, and I think with the radio also, it's more suited to listen at home, but also people are chatting a bit, giving you a bit of insight into the records. And it's more of a kind of almost like a personal conversation between the DJ and you. They're telling you a bit about their kind of lineage or their culture, or, yeah, that record, it means a lot to me. I mean, Louis Vega, the last time I listened to him, he was playing some music by his late uncle, Hector Lavoe, and, some amazing kind of NYC and Puerto Rican salsa. And obviously he touches on that in his music, but having a radio show where you're away from the four walls and the kind of slight musical confines of a club, it's just nice for it to be a bit more free and easy. No one, I don't know,
personal,
less mixing and more chatting. You know what I mean? Like you would if you were at a house party. Put a tune on, sometimes put an album on, tell people a bit about it, chat about the music, and get I don't know. It's more. There are more dimensions to the music than enjoying it, in communion with hundreds of other people, which is an amazing thing. But I think for me, it's more like, if the presentation is different and the circumstance is different, then sometimes, for me, I prefer the listening experience to reflect that. And I've just, I never get time to listen to radio. I'm always going through tunes or whatever. So for me, it's just like, yeah, let's have a bit of a tidy up, put some radio on halfway through. What's that tune? Make sure you buy it or whatever. But it's, yeah, for me, it's as a DJ and a listener, the two things are really kind of intertwined. You know what I mean? And I think you've got to buzz off other people in order to pass that buzz and share it. It's not all just one way. You know what I mean? It's, it's not everyone listen to me, because especially as a DJ, you're playing other people's vibes with the inspiration of their little buzz, which have, and every little story behind every little tune is, you know, it's kind of unique and personal, and you know, obviously the whole, even generally like the stories of kind of cultures and genres and the way that people migrate and the music comes with them, and it kind of, you know, it adapts to meet its new environment and all that kind of thing, or gets twisted by the people in the host country, you know what I mean? And all these, the UK is obviously a very, you know, kind of prime example of that. But it's kind of, yeah, for me, following these little stories and the trails and emphasizing the human element, and also for me finding little angles on music to kind of pull it together in a way that makes sense, even if you don't know the stories behind it, you know what I mean? Because for me, you know, listening to music's like reading a book. You kind of, it gives you this imagery, you know what I mean? And it's whatever that music conjures up in your head, and that could just be like, I don't know, you know, a sleeve. I look at that sleeve. I remember opening that as a promo like 30 years ago, and how I felt when I first listened to it. You know what I mean? It's odd, or you know, or kind of whether it's got an amazing picture sleeve or some little home done deliberately kind of ghetto style old house 12-inch from 1987 or whatever. But it's still like all these little objects that people have put their love into. You know what I mean? And then you get to kind of, you know, get a few of them together and, you know, play a couple of them at the same time sometimes and make another little story, which could be something completely different from what was intended from the original creator. You know what I mean? So it's for me, it's the possibilities of music are so endless that it's always interesting to see what other people's viewpoints are, because we're all, whatever situation we're in, we're always trying to make sense of it. You know what I mean? And I've spent the last, you know, 30, 40 years collecting music and trying to make sense of it. And I realised when I hit about 30, it's like, I'm never going to know it all. I'm never going to make sense. But that's kind of liberating as well. It's just like, yeah, I don't know everything. I never will. And there's you know, there's people all over the world who know way about more than me about certain kinds of music. You know what I mean? In terms of being into everything. Obviously, in some areas, I'm going to be spreading myself a bit thin, or other people are like, yeah, that's my thing. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, yeah, yeah, for me, the power that music has to kind of connect and bring people together. You know, it's the same as all art, isn't it? That someone, you know, someone can put a message out, and whether it's received in the way it was intended or interpreted in a different way, those little, almost like chemical reactions that sets off in the eye or the ear or the tongue of the beholder, you know, and what that sets them off to do, you know what I mean? For me, new releases can recontextualize an old release from 40 years ago, you know, some
100%.
new kind of, I don't know, some electronic thing, and I'm like, wow, that reminds me of something from 1985 that this young producer's probably never heard or even knows about, you know what I mean? So it's like, right, that's another connection for me. I can play this new record and then also flip back to this old thing, and I don't know, it's, for me,
it's almost like your Minority Report. It's almost like your Minority Report, and you're swooping everything like. Well, I love it though, because it's the subtle nuances. It's the subtle nuances that you get when you hear something that, for me, why I love music is it's the only proven time machine. It can take you back to anywhere, any point, and you can remember what you're wearing, who you're with. Like, that is fact. It is a time machine, and with that comes beautiful heirlooms of memories, but also future ones that you can go to create as well. And I think off the back of the radio shows that you were saying, with the DJs and the caliber of them, when you get to see them in a club, you're sharing that in an immersive experience. But when you actually hear them be a bit more personal, like you say, it opens them up a bit more, and it creates more of a truer connection. And for me, and I'm sure everybody that is listening to this now, you're so fascinating. Like, already we're drawn to you, not only from before, but the music, but now the way that you're putting it across. And we're really getting a pure insight out to how you, it really is really sharing a spotlight on just how you think about things. And we're just all connected at the minute. Everyone's just vibing.
No, it's good. But I think these chats are kind of, well, I've not done it before. I've done interviews and all that kind of thing. And all these, you know, this is, because I always find it interesting, like, you know, what point of view are you coming from? Why are you asking people questions? Because obviously, I suppose the thing about interviews as well is, like, you know, you obviously have your basic, you know, you sort of list of generic questions, which everyone's heard, and it's kind of, you can tell that in terms of journalism. But I think in terms of having a chat, the pressure's off because you don't have to write this up afterwards. You know what I mean? You don't have to package it into like 1,500 words and get some photos or whatever. So it's actually, you know, the same with radio. It's like no one's trying to keep a dance floor going. And I think also, you know, with a club, I think there are certain kind of technical expectations and a kind of, not a pressure to perform, but a certain level of visible enjoyment and energy that needs to be attained within a certain time frame. You know what I mean? And I love that as a kind of game, but that's why I'm on all night, so I can, like, there's no pressure for me. But I think a lot of people maybe play for, you know, 2 or 3 hours and kind of wouldn't necessarily play a ballad to a packed club. They can also, you know, on the radio they can go, yeah, here's a 15-minute jazz ballad, and here's why I like it. You know what I mean? Or I first heard this by this DJ, or I saw this artist, you know, then, and that's something that Giles Peterson is obviously very good at because he's, you know, been at it for a long time. But obviously it's kind of interesting because, you know, like in the UK there are lots of different scenes all running concurrently, and you have people like Giles, people like Colin Curtis who've been involved in several, you know, along the years. You know, Colin's been DJing for over 50 years now. But then it's like, what about all these scenes going on in different countries, and how do they view the music that's coming from us? You know, I had a good chat with my friend Jamie326 from Chicago. He lives in the Netherlands now, but we were talking about early 80s, and I was saying that mid 80s we were fawning over all these Chicago imports by people we've never heard of. You know what I mean? I'd be earning £5 a week on my paper round, paying £4.25 for an import from East Block or Piccadilly Records. He was in Chicago. He knew all the people who made those tunes. He wasn't bothered about those. He was fawning over New Order and Human League and 17 and a lot of the Italian records. So it's kind of like, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but a lot of time music from places other than where you're from, in terms of you're not directly attuned to why those records are being made and the cultural, especially with kind of club music, the cultural conditions with which those musics are made, they almost have a lot more allure and kind of mystery about them, because all you've got is like this label spinning around and this amazing stuff coming out the speakers, you know what I mean? And it's kind of, I think, almost like this anonymity of exotic music from whatever angle. You know, music from Sheffield is exotic to people in Chicago.
Sheffield as exotic has never been put together.
but you know what I mean? I mean, maybe
I know what you mean, though.
Topical at the moment, but it's it's fascinating and kind of what you take for granted, new and exciting by someone else. You know what I mean?
I do. Your screen's froze at the minute, but we can still hear, so I'll still see if we can still continue when the screen catches up. Here we go. Let's see. Can you hear me now? Yes, perfect.
Yes, I can. Just
I wonder if you know, off the back of that, what your output is going to be during lockdown. Then, as you say, you know, you're not quite sure of the live streams or recreating that club element, but then you've just celebrated like the radio side of it, and everything that you say now seems like if this was to be intermixed with like tunes that, you know, that you've already pulled, that it seems like it's already like made for you. So do you think that you'd be doing like a self-produced radio show? Do you think that that's an option?
Yeah, I think so. I've been chatting to Worldwide about doing like a monthly show or something, because I used to do loads of radio back in the radio sort of every week for about 10 years, something like that. I really enjoy it, you know what I mean? It was one of those, but it did take up quite a lot of time, but so do gigs. So if I'm not gigging, then, you know, I'm going to sort of tickle my feet back into radio, I reckon, because I love it. You know, it's a completely different environment. It's something I'm comfortable with, and it's nice to be able to kind of theme shows and that kind of thing and talk about the music. I think that is something that you can't really do with clubs, and obviously you can try and kind of tell some story and obviously make yourself available if people want to know about tunes, but I think just being able to freestyle it as if you're talking to one person rather than to hundreds, you know what I mean, and yes, it's a very different way of presenting music, and something which is, works really hand in hand with club music. I mean, for me, I love playing really mellow music in clubs as well as really aggressive music. But I think for radio, there are no real boundaries. There's no excuse for not dropping a tune if you like it.
Do you think if you were to set that up during this time, would you have any guest on it? Because almost like a Desert Island Disc scenario, or going tune for tune with different people. If they tell you one tune, then you bring up a tune. Just trying to. What I always do is I always like to, as we're speaking, come up with some form of ideas that I get to give and bestow the people I'm speaking with. So that could be good, like almost like a back-to-back, but you speaking with, say, a Giles Peterson, you play a song and then it gets him buzzed up, and then he'll play a song and then you chat about it and then you'll play a song. That is a right idea. You can have that. That's a gift from me.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've thought about doing kind of interviews and stuff for people, or having guests on, but then I suppose at the moment, it's how do you do that remotely? You know what I mean?
This format's good for it,
Yeah. But I think it's just doing it with like a mic and a good interface, and having someone. If you're going to play tunes with someone, there needs to be no latency. So it's all kind of boring technical stuff. But I've done I've webcams and I'm chatting. There's a few people I want as guests if I can have it. You know what I mean? But it's working. It's
Any
also
exclusive reveals? Any exclusive
well,
reveals to names?
Well, I'd really like to get MC Quasi on, because he's a big music head. He does loads of my gigs with me in terms of like hosting the gig, but he never chooses the music. And he's been doing that for club nights in like 20-25 years, and then vocalist in many bands and stuff like that. And I think quite often it's nice to ask people who aren't DJs but are music lovers and have very deep musical roots and kind of knowledge, kind of go, because he's normally like the bouncy, happy guy on stage. It's like, no, let's sit down, let's have a nice, calm chat about what you do. So he's someone that I thought would be really good. But same again, it's just making sure that either we wait a bit until we're allowed to sit in the same room without stressing out about it, or we do it, from, I'll do it from my house and do a link with his or whatever. So yeah, I'm kind of enjoying not thinking too much about the technical stuff, and just enjoying the weather. But it's been whirring around there, you know what I mean? But for the moment, it's just like tidy up records, and I've got about 1,000 waiting to go to charity shop now. So it's just as soon as they open, it's like, there you go.
I'm sure there's people in this group like myself who will happily be like the recipient of. We'll be a communal charity shop right now. We'll all take a dib on like any vinyl that's going.
Well, there's a really good. There's a shop in Manchester which I suppose like cuts a few people out, but it's called Reach Out to the Community, which is it's in Chorlton in Manchester, and they deal a lot with homeless people or people who are in kind of insecure accommodation. And it's like, it's not like your kind of Oxfams where there's volunteers in the shops and people all over the world. It's literally, there's two girls, Steph and Becky, who work in the shop, and they do the outreach as well. And there's a few employees and volunteers in the shop, but it's proper rootsy, you know what I mean? So I just take my record in there, I price them up, put them in order, come back next week with another load. But
Class.
We do a lot of fundraising for those, because I think a lot of the local charities, they don't have the budget to pay for a load of drama students to sit in a call centre and ring up regular contributors and stuff like that. And you know what I mean, all your shelters and your Oxfams, they'll have people dressed in the livery, with a clipboard, being all friendly and showing this, they don't have people chasing money like that. And I understand why the big charities do it, but I think the little ones, especially the local ones, it's like if I'm donating, money or goods to this shop, this is directly benefiting people who live in my area, you know what I mean, who the people in the shop know. And at the moment their shop's not open, so they're doing a lot of food parcels and kind of coordinating that. But there's little initiatives like that all over the country, you know what I mean, because people are also respond to whatever the needs of vulnerable people in their local area as well. So that's just kind of what happens with all my vinyl. But one of the guy in there, Andy's a DJ who works in there. So Andy Newen's a very good Manchester DJ who, it's like, at least it's good when there's someone in the charities about music. So they're like, right, 12's there. There's all the hip hop 12s. There's the house 12s. There's the rubbish, easy listening records that might have a drum break on. You know what I mean? But it's kind of like, it's nice to know that I know where the money's going. It's only down the road, and the people and the people in the shop are absolute diamonds as well. So it's worth a day out to Manchester.
We'll all get over. We'll all get over. As soon as lockdown's lifted, there'll just be a queue outside this shop.
Yeah, there's tons more, but it's nice. I've spent the last 30 years kind of touring and DJing, and kind of, if you're in a record shop in Vancouver and you've got 3 hours, you're just like, walking around with a pile like that. And I've found tunes at home I've not listened to for like 25 years. You know what I mean? Things I've bought and not listened to. So it's like big clear out. If I'm not going to play it, it needs to find a meaning, because I remember spending hours a week scouring charity shops in Stockport where I grew up. And it teaches you about music, because it's like, this album's 50p, I'm going to buy it anyway, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I know there's a whole generation of people who are still going in charity shops, bargain hunting, buying music they don't know, that kind of thing. It's nice, rather than just to hold on to it almost like, look, I need the room, I don't need these records. These need, like, another home for people to enjoy them and to kind of go through them. And the thing is with charity shops as well, you can buy a tune for £1, you don't like it, next day take it back to the charity shop, you know what I mean? And then it's on its journey again. And for me, that's a fascinating thing about vinyl. It's traveled. Half the records that I've bought secondhand, I don't know the life they've had before they ended up on my shelf. In terms of, like, whether it's part of someone's collection, or the kind of love and the fascination and the searches that went into this music. People being obsessive, running to the record shop, buying a tune, getting it home. 10 years later, they might fall on hard times, or just decide that CDs are better. And then that ends up in the second-hand shop. I buy it. It's like, where have you been before before I met you, kind of thing. But it's for me, I mean, in one way, it's odd for music to be an object. You know what I mean? I suppose looking back in time as well, like, music's only been an object for about the last 130 years, unless you count sheet music and music boxes. You know what I mean? Before that, it was just in the air. It had to be live. So it's kind of weird, you're walking around with, like, what weird design, you know what I mean? But I don't know, it's this that you can listen to. It's, obviously we grew up and kind of are familiar with it as a format, but it's an odd thing when you kind of think about it, like, you've got to take this thing out of this other thing and then put it on this bit of machinery and then put a little diamond on it and it decodes it, and the diamond's going round and round against this, this little valley of vinyl, and all this information is decoded and kind of released, at the moment that you choose to play it. It's kind of, magical. But I never get bored of that. I think the all these individual stories that have somehow made their way into my, kind of shelves and stuff like that through the travels over the.
Oh, one second. Sorry, you went just as you were saying that they've made these travels on the journeys.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I touched on this at the start, so I don't want to kind of go over old ground, but I think, it was just, all these records that I managed to pick up from all these different places. It's like, these are little bits of people's own personal history and collections. You've not only got the history and the kind of the lives of the musicians and the producers and the record labels, but also you've got the story of the people who bought these records, ended up in second-hand shops or on eBay or in charity shops. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I don't know, all these little connections and how music, makes its way all over the world. And I've heard that with my tunes. Someone's bought a tune and then they've emigrated somewhere, and it happened to be on at an important part of their life. You know what I mean? And it's kind of, wow, you don't think of this when you're when you're in the studio having fun. You're just like, oh wow, this is great vinyl. It's like thousands of them fly all over the world, and then you're like, you've absolutely no idea what happens to them when they kind of land on in people's houses.
Once you let it go for the world to
Yeah,
take ownership of it. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. What's coming through is the sense of community that you have for your own community as well. And I wonder if that then leans into your club nights. Does there feel like there's a real sense of community? Is it, regular people that you tend to see at the various events?
Yeah, there's a lot of regulars. I mean, I think for me, one thing that's kind of been lacking, and I feel very lucky as a kind of, I mean, I'm 48 now, so I started going clubbing in like 1990, and I remember that I think maybe over the last 10 or 15 years, I think there's been a couple of things which have sort of sucked a bit of the community out of clubs. I think having loads and loads of big names, then it almost belittles the importance of the audience. I think. I mean, audience is even is like a crowd or just a crew of people who come to an event. So I think when events don't grow out a small grassroots thing that are basically mates putting on a club night, and then they get a bit bigger and they kind of grow naturally, and their crowd grows with them, and they welcome newcomers, but they're also like, this is how we do things here. Welcome. We're pleased you can join us, and the newcomers bring energy, and the old timers bring a sense of tradition and kind of it's odd, you know what I mean? I think regulars in a club night are really as important the venue. They have their spot. They obviously know all the other regulars, so that's a kind of like a little community starting in itself. I think a good thing about regulars, if you've got a regular club night, is as a DJ, you have to keep things fresh because they'll have heard it all before otherwise, you know what I mean? But I think also newcomers are great because of their curiosity and energy. And I love speaking to people who are like, oh, my mate's brought me here. I've never heard you before. I don't know what any of this music is. And that's amazing. It's like, fine, you don't need to know what the music is. You can engage with this as much as you want. You might enjoy the atmosphere. You might be from a country where I just happen to have played a few tunes from. It's like, oh, right, wow, I'm from Venezuela. You played some Venezuelan salsa that my dad was into when I was young. It's like, I had was happening, you know what I mean? So it's mad all the little connections that happen, just as random part of everyday life. But I think it's good. I think there's a couple of measures which I think have really helped the crowd that the event is kind of set up with respect. And I think one is not overcrowding the venue. I think that is something which a lot of promoters have been really guilty. Promoters, especially where you have big lives in, everyone's really well known in the lineup and everyone's playing for an hour, but you have to like go to capacity to afford these crazy DJ bills. You know what I mean? And for me, the other thing is phones in venues, and we've stopped people, respectfully asked people to stop phones at my club night and a lot of other nights I play at. Really help the atmosphere because I think the dance
people
floor
on
is a
board
really
with that?
special place.
Are
Yeah,
people on
definitely.
board with that?
It's how you do it. Yeah, yes. But it's not like, no electronic devices and being militant. It's actually, look, we would rather you didn't. And it's like, look, it's fine to use your phone if you're in the bar. It's fine to use your phone if you're on the balcony. But for us, like we're in Band on the Wall, there's a balcony, there's another room next door, and then you have the dance floor. And the dance floor is not that big. So if you're like, or like you're on your phone, someone sent you a message and you stop dancing, that's actually quite badly affecting the energy in the room.
Detrimental to the vibe, yeah.
Well, it's a bit, I don't know, using your phone on the dance floor is like using your phone when you're at the dinner table, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you're in something communal with other people. And I think you are very much part of that energy. And for me, the dance floors, it's a few things I watch for. It's when a dance floor is full, that people are looking at each other rather than at me. I mean, obviously the energy is kind of, some of it's coming from me, but it's like, look, there's a bald bloke playing some records. There's not that much to look at, you know what I mean? So people might occasionally look my way, oh, hey, tune or whatever. But most of the time, it's like you've got groups of friends, people are meeting each other. You've got this like-minded melting pot of people from, different backgrounds and all different ages coming together in some kind of common cause, which is to have a good time to lots of different music. So there's a bit of an unspoken thing there. Like, we're all cool, we're all into different stuff, and people aren't shoved close together by it being overcrowded as well. You know what I mean? There's room to dance. You can throw a shake without knocking someone's drink. And if you do knock someone's drink, you apologise and buy them another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There were certain, I mean, you know, when I was 20, if you went to a club and knocked someone's drink over, you very quickly went to the bar and got another one, because there were a lot of gangsters in clubs. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think it's about building a community, and that seems to be coming out with a lot of smaller venues. You know what I mean? I mean, in Manchester, you know, you got White Hotel, you got Partisan, who are very, very community minded. You know what I mean? A lot of venues have, you know, kind of outreach stuff and youth workshops and things like that. And I think it's part, you know, it's not just kind of detecting the like supply and demand, like people demand a night out, we supply it, end of story. It's like, well, no, we are part of the lineage, you know, the cultural lineage of this city, you know, like Manchester especially. You know, there are so many different kinds of music which came through in a particular way in Manchester, and I'm kind of old enough to remember a lot of it. So you've got to kind of present it in a way that's not like a lesson or whatever, you know, because people don't come for a lesson when they go to a club, but you can present it in a way that might make people curious and a bit excited and go, what was that tune? You know what I mean? And it might be some obscure old 30-year-old street soul tune that never really made it out of Manchester. But you've also, I think, you know, with a club night, you've got to let the people be themselves as well. They kind of lead the way. And that's, you know, that's the thing about when you're DJing, you suggest a direction, but also, you know, I've got the privilege of being able to play all night, and people let me do what I want. So I kind of start off mellow, and people start dancing. It's like, actually, yeah, that's okay. You ready to dance now? You told me.
You take the nod, you take the lead from them. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the energy is exchanged in a kind of nice circular way. It's not just between the artist and the audience. As I think someone kind of quite accurately described, like a full venue is looking as like baked beans. You know what I mean? It's just like a load of heads. It's not a load of heads. But also, like when you start early, you get to see each member of the audience, or each member of the crowd, or the, you know, the collective, as being, you know, all right, that's that group of 4 people. They're really into that kind of music. Oh, there's that who was here last month. They're going to be straight on the dance floor. You know what I mean? And it's great seeing familiar places shout out when, you know, familiar faces shout out when they like a tune, and they're always in there. Yeah, I know you're up. That's your spot on the balcony. You know what I mean? I know if I look up, you'll be there. You know what I mean? So it's good, because the regulars are kind of almost doing the work of a host at the party, because they're comfortable with them themselves. They've known me for years. You know, I chat to them regularly, but they're also like, people can tell that they're comfortable there. You know what I mean? And they're interested in chatting to people, not, you know, why are you here and that kind of thing. And I've enjoyed, you know, I think all I do at my events is pass on the positive attributes of what I've enjoyed and experienced at other people's events, you know. And, you know, I used to go to a lot of Northern Soul nights, and if you go to a Northern Soul night for the first time, everybody in the venue knows that you're not a regular. So they're all coming up to you and going, hey mate, why are you here? Not in a weird, like, how did you hear about this? It's just like a Northern Soul night is almost like a family gathering, you know what I mean? These people, you know, have maybe been going, you know, for 30, 40 years as a crew. They all know each other. They all know the records. And, you know, me and a few mates will go, and it's like, you spend half the time at the bar, people asking you, like, why are you here? Or how did you hear about it? Or what do you think about this tune or that tune? Or that. It's kind of really interesting to see how much people care about their musical scenes or their gatherings, and the community that they've invested pretty much all their social life into, and probably a lot of their income in buying, you know, obscure records, or, you know, the travel. You know, like you look at the club scene from, you know, the 60s, 70s and 80s, and a lot of specialist scenes, Northern Soul, the kind of jazz funk scene, all the way up into, you know, kind of the early 80s. People, you know, like electro and jazz dance and all that kind of thing. People were traveling 300-400 miles, you know, for a club night, and then driving back afterwards. You know what I mean? And it's kind of that level of dedication, which that is why a lot of these scenes are really strong. You know what I mean? And it wasn't a lot of guest DJs in those days. It was quite often the same DJs, but they were going because they were going to hear music they couldn't hear anywhere else, you know, because it wasn't really getting played on radio, wasn't occasionally getting mentioned in magazines, might appear in a few specialist shops, but you had these DJs who were going all out to find this music that nobody else had, which was then shining a light on a lot of artists who might have otherwise been forgotten, you know, in America or whatever, or, you know, in if you look at Northern Soul, you have a lot of white working, really deliberately obscure, you know, soul music, mostly from Chicago and Detroit. You know, and a lot of these artists were working full time, you know, may have had 2 releases and went back to being a postal worker, or, you know, 5 years later, they're getting calls to play at Wigan Casino or whatever. And half the time, the audience can remember more of the words to their own tune, because they're like, it really didn't work out, back to work. And suddenly they're getting flown over to play in front of 1,000 people, singing all the words to possibly their only single. You know what I mean? It's kind of, and obviously that was happening in, you know, a lot of the jazz dance. You had a lot of, you know, American fusion artists who might have had one up-tempo tune on an album from the 70s or the early 80s, and, you know, people dancing to it in the UK. It wasn't intended as a dance floor track. You same again, you have records that are just being received on the other side of the world, often completely without the artist, and these are becoming classics in a completely different scene. But there are whole communities being, you know, kind of coalescing around these obscure records, you know. So and a lot of these artists are just getting on with their normal life, or might be, you know, kind of quite recognized on the sort of polite jazz fusion scene in, you know, in the US, absolutely having no idea that there's loads of amazing dancers at all-day events on a Sunday in Nottingham, 2,000 people getting down to that are massive anthems. You know what I mean? So it's kind of yeah, it's amazing the journeys all these tunes take. But then the communities that spring up around these obscure tunes, that then once you collect a few of them together, it gets a name, it becomes a genre. Then the scene becomes wider known outside of its kind of core kind of disciples, and then more people get involved, ends up in a few magazines. As long as you're making sure that people are coming into these scenes at a reasonable rate, you have a good vibe. It's just fresh blood, you know, tourists, if you see what I mean.
I don't know if you can still hear me. We got all of that, but it just takes a while to catch up. So if you just let me know when you've got me saying me. Perfect.
Right.
I think we're back on. Perfect. Yes. Yeah, it's just the catching up with the videos, but we got all of that. We got the majority of that, and I think you're right. And it's a real good breakdown of just not the communities that are, you know, built within a club confine, but the communities that spread around the world, like bringing artists that might not even know their hits are hits. It reminds me of is it Sugarman, the story of Rodrigo? Is it from South Africa? And just knowing that is a common factor within scenes going back in the day. I've got 2 final questions. Thank you for your time, Sloan. Thank you for agreeing to do this.
All right.
The first one is, I suppose the sort of intersect really, but the first one is, with scenes like that and scenes, you know, with the community that you're creating, do you get a chance to go to any club nights or events that, you know, you feel are doing that as well? Or do you think that you're a sort of island in the way of the club sort of landscape at the moment? And to add on to that, how do you feel once lockdown's lifted, the impact is going to be on how we go about clubbing? Because it feels like the social distancing will mean better traction to smaller size venues. So will that work in its favour?
Yeah, firstly, yeah, I go to, I mean, you know, I DJ a lot of weekends. I mean, obviously we're talking sort of pre-March, so often on the Saturday night, I'm not going to a club or whatever, but I do. Yeah, there's some little ones in Manchester. The ones I go to are little venues. There's a night called Community, which is run by a guy called Irfan Rainey, who's been DJing for about 25, 30 years in Manchester. And, you know, he's got a really crowd, really good sound system, the best dancers, which I think is something which, in terms of quality of dancing and that kind of energy, is something which I think is, apart from, obviously you have exceptions like footwork and stuff like that, but I think that's one of the things which is sort of kind of empty clubbing over the last 20 years or so. I just think the kind of intense dancing, a lot of the time simply because venues are too busy and the dancers don't like busy venues. So that might be something that comes back, I think, once we all have a bit more space to shake the shoulder. But yeah, I don't see myself as an island. I see myself as someone who's kind of, I've taken my cue from lots of different scenes, because every scene presents its music in a different way and goes about their thing kind of technically and presentation wise, and the way the crowd behave and dress and all that kind of thing in different ways. So I kind of, I've sort of pick and mix in terms of, I've been paying attention to all of it all the time. But there's loads of great nights. And I prefer the little local ones because, it's socializing and get to hear some music. I love hearing, passionate people share music, whether that's on radio or in a club. And I like doing that when I'm on a night off. I love the fact that if I'm DJing with someone else, I can, especially back to back, even if it's on my own nights, if I'm playing back to back with someone, they play a tune I like, I'm on the dance floor, they can take care of it. So it's kind of, I've been doing that recently because I had 15 years playing on my Todd, and it was good, but then I kind of missed out, I think, on, kind of being able to enjoy my own night as a punter, and also hearing other people DJ, because every time I was in a club, it was just me all night, you know what I mean? And I really enjoyed that journey, but I think now I'm getting a bit less precious about it. Maybe the control freak in me has kind of backed off a bit. But it's great, I've enjoyed having guests. I'm sure I'd love to do that on radio. I love hearing people's stories and what makes them buzz. Whether that's a musical story kind of technically being told by a DJ in a club, or whether that's talking, with someone and they're pulling out tunes. I think the future for clubs, who knows? I think, in terms, sweaty indoor venues are going to be among the last places to kind of, go back to whatever normality is. So yeah, we'll see. I'm kind of enjoying the pause at the moment. I think, I think people are going to be more careful sharing confined spaces with people they know. I think what's been described recently as a bubble in relation more to schools going back and stuff like that. So I think, maybe this is going to, sort of ramp up into kind of barbecues if the weather stays nice, you know what I mean? Bit of music, 15 people in a back garden or whatever, or on the park, and I think these informal things, we're going to start, or not doing stuff from the ground up, but I think we're going to, depending on how, the situation evolves, we're going to have to find new ways to be with each other. And that might just mean with less people, which is no bad thing in terms of being able to give your time and attention one-on-one with people. Whether that, I have no idea how the whole club thing will do. Obviously, we've had different countries kind of going back to doing clubs. Yeah. It happened here, and then they had a spike and pulled the plug, you know what I mean? So I just think it's daft to rush into anything. You read on a lot of sites, kind of resident advisor and that, and they're like, oh, this is the future of clubbing and this is that. And, this party went on in this country with 100 people in a 2,000 capacity venue and everyone had to dance on the spot. And it's kind of like, sounds more like aerobic to me, you know what I mean? But yeah, who knows? It's I just think this kind of trying to second guess something which none of us have experienced before is kind of foolish. I think it's just more like, but I think the fact that we will all be enjoying music either by ourselves or with other people in some kind of virtual way, then that'll extend into like, oh, come round, we'll sit in the back garden and get some tunes on, and then maybe other things will kind of grow out of that in terms of, a mutual sharing and appreciation of music that might take on a different, format than, a traditional club. It might have to be outdoors more often in terms of, the reduced risk. Who knows? Obviously we're not in the best country for outdoor venues, but we're also might not be in the best place for kind of traveling around and going to places where there's guaranteed sunshine. But I think for the moment, it's kind of, if you're lucky enough to enjoy, some space and time, and, maybe in a few weeks, obviously following some sensible, proper medical advice, it's like, yeah, you can spend, prolonged time in the company of people, as long as you know, kind of watch yourself. People are going to be getting inventive with it. Same way people have been getting inventive online with how they present themselves and do radio shows or streaming or whatever. We're going to be experiencing some of that ingenuity in person. A lot of small businesses have been doing that. Like takeaways or places that are kind of they're almost creating a new demand for the new way that we've been behaving at home. You know what I mean? And it's kind of people are getting comfortable with waiting for stuff in queuing or booking stuff a few days in advance. And yeah, maybe the days of being shoulder to shoulder in a pub or a club like that, literally like being on a rush hour tram or tube train or bus are over, which is no bad thing. It's nice to be able to move around and shake your thing without, knocking someone's drink out of the hand. But yeah, we'll see. But then also a lot of those venues are that busy because of financial, constraints of high rent and also, fees and having to sell a certain amount of alcohol and all this kind of thing. So yeah, I think there are so many levels of of clubs and any kind of hospitality business where at the moment the way that people have been operating since before March, a lot of people's break-even point would have probably been around, I don't know, 70% or something, in terms of if you're less than 70% full, you're not going to make any money. So it's like a lot of business models are going to change, but then it's I think people getting creative and then working something out, and then whether they're going to bother monetizing it or just go, actually, I'm having far more fun in my back garden with 10 mates than I've ever had in a club. You know what I mean? Who knows? It's yeah. I think there are so many things to overthink and so many angles on this. And the last thing I'm thinking about is clubbing. There are so many kind of homeless people and people who are struggling, people on zero contract. You know what I mean? A lot of people who are being pressured into going back to work by unscrupulous bosses. Whether that's in the property market or retail and that kind of thing. So I don't know. Thinking about clubs and stuff seems a bit, I don't know, unnecessary. You know what I mean? It's like we should be using our time at the moment, I think, to make sure everyone's all right. Obviously, keep ourselves strong and healthy and all that kind of thing. Exercise, all these things that we've now hopefully got a bit more time to do, and checking in with other people. Well, a whole distraction of kind of political, and it's like So I think finding some calm, not thinking about, I don't know, like in an 8 months time. It's kind of I think that's a really long way off, and there will be obviously people who run clubs who will be thinking about that. I'm lucky that I don't own a club. You know what I mean? I'm not kind of belittling or sidelining people's concerns, but I think if a lot of the whole way that we are in a crowded situation has to change, a lot of people are going to have to be quite versatile, and I think it will be the people who are versatile and kind of nimble and like, this isn't a problem, this is a challenge, and that actually this has made us think about what we do in a completely different way.
Perfect. That was one of the most fascinating chats we've had here on Loose Lips. I tip my fedora in your direction. Incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe. Thank you, Andrew, as well, for being the glue that brought this. And stay safe. Bless you, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Enjoy your next chat. You're going to have a sore throat.
I know, mate. That's why I'm on the summer fruits. Well, thank you. Take care, brother. Peace.
All right. Bye. Keep it on.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you. A fountain of knowledge and just honestly a real in-depth, engaging conversation of discussion there. Thank you so much, Andy, aka Mr Scruff. Thank you everybody that's been involved in the comments, in the chats. Sorry if I wasn't able to put what you put into him, but obviously the chat was just free flowing. If you're new to this, I'm Ben Random. Welcome. This is Loose Lips. It's been created to speak with people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, to look to instill optimism and raise the spirits during these times. So if you want to see any of the back catalogue of any of the previous chats, feel free to go to YouTube and go to Pop Cult Chic, or likewise here on Instagram, go to pop.cult.chic. I'm literally going to be back in a second with another chat, so I'm going to finish this chat. Sonny, I see you've sent the request, my brother. I'm going to log off this chat, and then I'll be back on in the next 2 to conclude with my next chat, who is a public speaker, a motivational speaker by the name of Sunil Matt. So make sure you stick around and join me for that. Peace.